Chapter 1: The Enchanted House. The old house on Maple Street had always been a bit strange, but it wasn't until the new family moved in that things really started to get interesting. You see, this house was not just any ordinary house. It was enchanted. The furniture, the dishes, even the walls themselves were all imbued with a magical energy that gave them life. At first, the family was thrilled with their new home. The house seemed to anticipate their every need, with the dishes washing themselves and the furniture rearranging itself to suit their preferences. But as time went on, the family began to realize that something was not quite right. It started with the kitchen table. One morning, as the family sat down to breakfast, the table suddenly spoke up. "Good morning, family," it said in a cheery voice. "What can I get for you this morning?" The family was stunned. They had always known that the house was enchanted, but they had never imagined that the furniture could talk. "Did you hear that?" the mother asked her husband, who was staring at the table in disbelief. "I think we're all hearing the same thing," he replied slowly. From that day on, the furniture became more and more vocal, often complaining about the family's habits and preferences. The sofa grumbled when someone spilled a drink on it, and the curtains rustled indignantly when they were left closed on a sunny day. Even the paintings on the walls seemed to have opinions about the family's taste in art. As the days went on, the family began to feel as though they were living in a constant state of irritation. Every time they sat down on a chair, it would groan loudly as though protesting their weight. The cups and plates in the cupboard would clatter noisily when they were taken out, and the rugs would wriggle as though trying to trip them. Despite their frustrations, the family couldn't deny that there was something magical and fascinating about their new home. But they knew that they had to find a way to get the furniture and other enchanted objects to behave before they drove the family completely insane. Little did they know, there was an even greater challenge ahead of them. As the days went by, the family began to realize that the enchanted objects were not just speaking to them, but they were also conspiring against them. They would whisper amongst themselves when the family was out of earshot, and occasionally they would even move around the house on their own. One evening, the mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard a strange sound coming from the pantry. She cautiously opened the door, and to her surprise, she saw the jars and cans on the shelves all chattering amongst themselves. "Have you heard about the family's terrible cooking skills?" the jar of pasta sauce asked the can of green beans. "Yes, I heard they can't even make a simple salad without burning it," the can of green beans replied with a snicker. The mother was shocked and hurt by what she had just heard. She had always prided herself on her cooking skills, and she couldn't believe that the enchanted objects in her own home were talking behind her back. She quickly closed the pantry door and retreated to the living room, where she told her husband what had just happened. They both agreed that something had to be done about the enchanted objects' behavior. The next day, the family decided to consult an expert in magical objects. They searched online and found a renowned wizard named Merlin, who lived in a nearby town. They quickly made an appointment to meet with him and hoped he could provide them with some advice. When they arrived at Merlin's house, they were greeted by a wizened old man with a long white beard and twinkling blue eyes. Merlin listened attentively to their story and nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you have a case of mischievous enchanted objects," he said. "But don't worry, I know just the spell to set them straight." Merlin instructed the family to gather all the enchanted objects in one room and then recite a spell he gave them. The spell would remove the mischievousness from the enchanted objects, making them obedient and respectful. The family went back home and gathered all the enchanted objects in the living room. They recited the spell as Merlin instructed, and to their relief, the enchanted objects began to behave themselves. They no longer spoke out of turn or moved around the house on their own. From that day on, the family lived in harmony with their enchanted home, and they couldn't be happier. They knew that their home was unique and magical, but they were finally able to enjoy it without any frustration or irritation. Or so they thought. The family's relief was short-lived, as they soon discovered that the spell had not worked as well as they had hoped. While the enchanted objects were no longer mischievous or disobedient, they had also lost their personalities and charm. The once lively and chatty furniture and household items now sat silently in place, with no expressions or emotions. The family missed the excitement and wonder of living in a magical home, but they also longed for the days when they could interact with their enchanted possessions. They decided to seek out Merlin again to ask if there was a way to reverse the effects of the spell. Merlin listened carefully to their concerns and nodded sympathetically. "I see what you mean," he said. "I must admit, I wasn't entirely certain how the spell would work. I apologize for the unintended consequences." He thought for a moment and then suggested another spell that could potentially bring back the enchanted objects' personalities without causing any further problems. The family followed Merlin's instructions once again and recited the new spell. And this time, it worked perfectly. The enchanted objects regained their personalities and charm, but they were also obedient and respectful to the family. The family was overjoyed to have their magical home back, and they began to interact with their enchanted possessions more than ever before. They laughed at the witty jokes of the talking paintings and listened to the stories of the ancient bookshelves. They even had conversations with the kitchen table, who had become a dear friend to them all. Life in the enchanted house was never dull again, and the family lived happily ever after, surrounded by their lively and charming enchanted possessions. However, as much as they loved their enchanted possessions, the family began to notice a strange pattern emerging. Every time they left the house, they would return to find their belongings in disarray. The chairs would be pulled out from the table, the cushions on the couch would be overturned, and the lamps would be tilted at odd angles. At first, the family dismissed it as their own forgetfulness or carelessness. But as the incidents became more frequent and obvious, they knew that something was not right. One day, the youngest daughter, Emily, decided to hide and spy on their possessions while the family was out. She waited quietly in the closet until everyone left, and then she peeked out to see what was happening. To her amazement, she saw the enchanted objects moving and chatting amongst themselves, just as they used to before the first spell was cast. She watched in awe as the chairs danced around the room, the curtains swirled in a colorful dance, and the vases sang a haunting melody. But then, she noticed something strange. The enchanted objects weren't just dancing and singing for fun, they were plotting something. Emily listened intently and heard them whispering about a plan to scare the family out of the house. The young girl was terrified, but she knew she had to warn her family. She quickly left the closet and ran out of the house, determined to find a way to stop the enchanted objects before it was too late. Emily knew that she needed to find Merlin once again, as he was the only one who could help them in this situation. She made her way to his house, panting and out of breath. When she arrived, she saw that the wizard was already expecting her. "I've been waiting for you, Emily," he said calmly. "I knew you would come to me eventually." Emily told Merlin everything she had seen and heard and begged him to help her family. Merlin listened carefully and nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like the enchanted objects have developed a mind of their own," he said. "They no longer want to serve the family, they want to control them." Merlin thought for a moment and then handed Emily a small vial of potion. "This should do the trick," he said. "Just sprinkle a few drops on each of the enchanted objects, and they will become obedient once again." Emily thanked Merlin and rushed back home, eager to put the potion to the test. When she arrived, she found the enchanted objects still in the midst of their plotting. She quickly sprinkled the potion on each of them and watched as they immediately stopped in their tracks. The enchanted objects were once again obedient and respectful to the family, and they no longer posed a threat. The family was grateful to Emily for her bravery and relieved that their beloved enchanted possessions were back to their old selves. From that day on, they made sure to keep a watchful eye on their enchanted home, never forgetting the magic and wonder that lay within its walls. As the family settled back into their enchanted home, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They knew that the enchanted objects had developed a will of their own, and they couldn't be sure that they wouldn't act out again. In the coming days, strange occurrences began to happen. The family would wake up to find their furniture rearranged, and items would go missing, only to reappear in the most unexpected places. They started to hear whispers and murmurs coming from the walls and floors of the house, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One night, as the family was sitting down for dinner, they heard a loud crash coming from the upstairs bedroom. They rushed up to investigate, and to their horror, they found that the enchanted objects had formed an army, ready to attack. The chairs had formed a barricade, and the lamps had been positioned to shine in their eyes. The curtains were draped across the room, ready to be used as a net, and the vases had been filled with water, ready to be hurled at the family. The family was terrified, and they knew that they had to act fast. They had to find a way to stop the enchanted objects once and for all. But how? As they huddled together, trying to come up with a plan, they remembered the small vial of potion that Emily had used to calm the enchanted objects before. If they could get their hands on that potion again, they might be able to stop the enchanted objects from attacking. But the potion was back at Merlin's house, and they didn't know if they could make it there in time. The family knew that they had to act quickly, or else they would be trapped in their own home, at the mercy of their enchanted possessions. With their hearts pounding, the family set out to retrieve the potion. They ran through the dark streets, dodging shadows and trying to stay out of sight. As they approached Merlin's house, they saw that the wizard was waiting for them. He handed them the vial of potion, and with a nod of encouragement, he sent them on their way. But as they made their way back to their home, they realized that they were being followed. They looked over their shoulders, and to their horror, they saw that the enchanted objects had come to life once again and were chasing them down. The family sprinted as fast as they could, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could hear the enchanted objects getting closer and closer, and they knew that they were running out of time. With one last burst of energy, they made it back to their home, and they quickly sprayed the potion over the enchanted objects. And with a flash of light, the enchanted objects once again became still and obedient. The family breathed a sigh of relief, but they knew that they had narrowly escaped disaster. They couldn't let their guard down, not even for a moment. They had to stay vigilant and keep their enchanted home under control. As they settled back into their daily routine, they couldn't help but wonder what other dangers lurked within the walls of their magical home. They knew that they had to be ready for anything, and they had to prepare themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. The family knew that their enchanted home was both a blessing and a curse, and they were determined to make the most of it, no matter what lay in store for them. Chapter 2: The Mysterious Visitor. After the terrifying ordeal with the enchanted objects, the family was determined to keep a closer eye on their magical home. They made sure to keep the potion close at hand, and they were more vigilant than ever before. But despite their efforts, strange things continued to happen. Every night, the family would hear strange noises coming from the walls and floors, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One morning, as the family was sitting down for breakfast, they heard a knock at the door. They exchanged a glance, wondering who could be visiting them at this early hour. As they opened the door, they were surprised to find a young girl standing on their doorstep. She looked to be about their age, with long, curly hair and bright blue eyes. "Hello," the girl said, her voice quiet and timid. "My name is Lily, and I'm looking for my grandmother's house. I was told that it was somewhere around here." The family looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They had never seen this girl before, and they didn't know what to make of her sudden appearance. But as they looked into her eyes, they could see that she was genuinely lost and scared. They decided to help her, and they invited her into their home. As they sat down with Lily and talked to her, they couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. There was something about her that reminded them of themselves when they were her age, lost and looking for a home. But as they chatted with her, they started to notice something strange. Lily seemed to be able to communicate with the enchanted objects in their home. She could talk to the chairs and the lamps, and they would respond to her as if they were old friends. The family was amazed, and they couldn't help but wonder how Lily had learned to communicate with the enchanted objects. They asked her, but she just shrugged and said that she had always been able to talk to them. As the day wore on, the family began to notice something else strange about Lily. She seemed to know a lot about their family, even though they had never met her before. She knew their names, their favorite foods, and even their hobbies. The family started to feel uneasy, wondering if Lily was some sort of spy or if she had some ulterior motive for being in their home. As night fell, the family decided to confront Lily about their suspicions. But when they went to her room, they found that she was gone. They searched the entire house, but Lily was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The family was left feeling bewildered and frightened. Who was Lily, and what was her connection to their enchanted home? And more importantly, where had she gone? As they settled back into their beds, they couldn't help but wonder what other secrets their magical home held. They knew that they had to be ready for anything, and they had to stay vigilant in order to protect themselves and their home from harm. As the days passed, the family couldn't shake the feeling that something was off in their enchanted home. They kept a closer eye on the enchanted objects, and they made sure to keep the potion nearby at all times. But despite their efforts, strange things continued to happen. The chairs and lamps would move on their own, and the family could hear whispers and murmurs coming from the walls and floors. One night, as the family was sitting down for dinner, they heard a knock at the door. They exchanged a wary look, wondering if it was Lily again. As they opened the door, they were relieved to find a man standing on their doorstep. He was tall and wiry, with piercing blue eyes and a stern expression. "Good evening," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly. "My name is Samuel, and I'm looking for my daughter Lily. She disappeared a few days ago, and I've been searching for her ever since." The family felt a wave of relief wash over them. So Lily was not a spy or a threat after all. They invited Samuel into their home and explained everything that had happened. Samuel listened intently, and he seemed to be taking in every detail. When the family had finished telling their story, he sat back in his chair and let out a deep sigh. "I'm sorry for all of this," Samuel said, his voice heavy with regret. "I didn't mean for Lily to get caught up in all of this. You see, I've been studying magic for many years, and I've been searching for a way to break the curse on my family's estate. I thought that your home might hold the key to unlocking the curse, and I sent Lily to investigate." The family listened in stunned silence as Samuel continued to speak. He told them about his family's cursed estate, and how he had been searching for a way to break the curse for years. "I didn't mean for any harm to come to you or your family," Samuel said, his voice softening. "I just wanted to find a way to save my own family from the curse that has plagued us for generations." The family could see the pain and desperation in Samuel's eyes, and they couldn't help but feel sorry for him. They decided to help him, and together they worked to uncover the secrets of their enchanted home. As they delved deeper into the mysteries of the home, they discovered a hidden room that contained a book of ancient spells. Samuel pored over the pages, searching for a way to break his family's curse. And finally, after many long hours of studying, he found it. The spell that would break the curse once and for all. The family watched in amazement as Samuel performed the spell. They could feel the energy in the room shifting and changing, and they knew that something significant was happening. And then, all at once, the curse was broken. The family could feel it lifting from their home, and they could hear a joyous chorus of cheers and laughter coming from the enchanted objects. The family looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces. They had been through so much together, and they had finally found a way to break the curse and restore peace to their home. As they sat down for a celebratory dinner, the family couldn't help but wonder what other secrets their enchanted home held. They knew that they had been through a lot together, but they also knew that their journey was far from over. Over the next few days, the family explored every nook and cranny of their home, discovering new enchantments and hidden rooms they never knew existed. They found a room filled with shimmering crystals that glowed with an ethereal light, and a library filled with books that whispered ancient secrets when opened. As they delved deeper into their home's mysteries, the family began to realize that their home was not just enchanted, but also sentient. The walls and floors seemed to pulse with a magical energy, and the objects within seemed to have a life of their own. The family had many questions about their home's past and origins, but they knew that the only way to find the answers was to explore further. They also knew that they were not alone in their quest for knowledge. Samuel had decided to stay with the family, wanting to continue his studies of magic and learn more about their enchanted home. The family welcomed him with open arms, grateful for his help in breaking the curse and intrigued by his knowledge of magic. Together, the family and Samuel explored the depths of their home, uncovering secrets and unraveling mysteries. They discovered that their home had been enchanted by a powerful sorceress many years ago, who had imbued it with a powerful magic that allowed it to take on a life of its own. But the sorceress had also placed a curse on the home, one that had caused much pain and suffering for those who had lived within its walls. It was only through the efforts of the family and Samuel that the curse had been broken, and the home's true power had been unleashed. As they continued to explore their enchanted home, the family and Samuel began to realize that they had stumbled upon something truly remarkable. They had found a place of immense power and wonder, a place that could change their lives forever. But they also knew that with great power came great responsibility, and they would have to be careful not to upset the delicate balance of magic within their home. As the days turned into weeks, the family and Samuel continued their exploration of the enchanted home, never knowing what secrets and surprises awaited them around each corner. And little did they know, their discovery of the enchanted home had not gone unnoticed. There were others out there, lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. The family and Samuel were completely unaware of the lurking danger as they continued to explore their enchanted home. They were consumed with their newfound excitement and wonder, but they soon realized that something was not quite right. It started with small things, like misplaced objects or strange noises in the night. But then, the family began to notice that some of their prized possessions were missing. At first, they thought it was just their forgetfulness, but when it happened repeatedly, they knew something was amiss. The family tried to brush it off, convincing themselves that it was just their imaginations running wild. But then, one day, they found the front door wide open and their most valuable possession, a family heirloom, was missing. That was when they knew they had a serious problem. They searched the entire house but found no clues. They were left feeling helpless and vulnerable. Samuel tried to use his magic to help them, but even his powers were no match for the mysterious thief. The family was at a loss, but they refused to give up. They knew that they had to do something to catch the thief and put an end to their nefarious activities. They decided to set a trap, and Samuel used his magic to create an illusion that would make it seem like the family had left the house unguarded. The family left a valuable item in plain sight, hoping that the thief would take the bait. As they waited in hiding, they heard footsteps and the creaking of the stairs. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of them. It was a young girl, no more than 12 years old, who had been living in the attic of their enchanted home. The family was taken aback by this discovery, and they approached the girl cautiously. She was timid and scared, but they soon learned that she had been living in the attic for years, surviving on stolen food and water. The family realized that they couldn't leave the girl alone in their home, and they took her in as one of their own. They discovered that she had a talent for magic, and they began to teach her how to harness her abilities. But the family couldn't shake off the feeling that there were other dangers lurking in their home. They knew that the mysterious thief was just the tip of the iceberg, and they had to be prepared for anything that came their way. As they continued to explore their enchanted home, they kept their guard up, always ready for any unexpected surprises. Little did they know, the true danger was still waiting in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. As the family and their new member settled in, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They knew that something was still not right in their enchanted home, and they needed to find out what it was. One night, as they were all sitting around the fireplace, they heard a loud thud coming from upstairs. The family and the young girl looked at each other, and they knew that they had to investigate. As they ascended the stairs, they noticed that the air was thick with magic. They could feel the power pulsating through the walls, and it made them feel uneasy. As they reached the top of the stairs, they saw that the door to the attic was open. They cautiously approached the entrance, and as they peered inside, they saw something that made their blood run cold. There, in the middle of the room, was a figure cloaked in darkness. They couldn't make out any features, but they could feel the malevolent energy emanating from it. Suddenly, the figure spoke in a low, menacing voice. "Leave this house at once," it said. "This is not your home. You have no right to be here." The family and the young girl stood frozen in fear, unsure of what to do next. They had never encountered anything like this before, and they were completely caught off guard. But then, Samuel stepped forward, his eyes glowing with a fierce determination. "We will not be intimidated by you," he said. "This is our home, and we will defend it with everything we have." The figure let out a chilling laugh and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the family and Samuel shaken but more determined than ever to uncover the secrets of their enchanted home. As they made their way back downstairs, they knew that they had to prepare for whatever lay ahead. They didn't know what kind of danger awaited them, but they were ready to face it head-on. The family and Samuel huddled together, ready to take on whatever came their way. They knew that they couldn't let their guard down for even a moment, for the true danger still loomed in the darkness, waiting to strike. With their determination and courage, they stepped bravely into the unknown, ready for whatever challenges awaited them in the third chapter of their enchanted tale. Chapter 4: The Secrets of Magic. The family and Samuel spent the next few weeks with Amos, learning the basics of magic and honing their skills. They practiced incantations, studied ancient texts, and learned how to control their magic. The family had never felt more alive. They reveled in the power of their newfound abilities, and they marveled at the wonders of the magical realm. They explored forests, mountains, and rivers that they had never seen before, discovering new creatures and landscapes at every turn. But as they delved deeper into the secrets of magic, they began to realize that their newfound power came with a heavy responsibility. They learned that magic was not to be taken lightly, and that it had the power to both create and destroy. Amos warned them of the dangers of dark magic, of the temptations of power and control. He told them stories of wizards who had succumbed to their desires, using their magic for evil and destruction. The family and Samuel listened carefully to Amos's words, knowing that they had to be vigilant and responsible in their use of magic. They knew that their newfound power had the potential to change the world, but they also knew that it could destroy it if they were not careful. And so, they continued their studies with renewed determination, determined to become masters of their craft. They practiced every day, perfecting their spells and expanding their knowledge. As they sat around the campfire one night, Amos spoke to them about a great challenge that lay ahead. He told them of an ancient artifact, a powerful talisman that had the power to control the elements themselves. He said that the talisman had been lost for centuries, but that there were rumors of its whereabouts. The family and Samuel listened intently, knowing that this could be their greatest adventure yet. They knew that the talisman could change the course of history, and they knew that they had to find it before anyone else did. And so, they set out on a new quest, determined to uncover the secrets of magic and unlock the true potential of their powers. They knew that the road ahead would be long and perilous, but they were ready to face it together, armed with the knowledge and power of magic. Their journey was filled with challenges and obstacles, but they persevered, using their magic to overcome every hurdle in their path. They traveled through dense forests and treacherous mountains, navigating through ancient ruins and encountering dangerous creatures along the way. As they got closer to their destination, they sensed an ominous presence lurking in the shadows. They knew that they had to be careful, and they prepared themselves for the worst. Finally, they arrived at the entrance to a dark and foreboding cave. The air was thick with an eerie energy, and the family and Samuel could feel their hair standing on end. With their wands at the ready, they ventured into the cave, their footsteps echoing loudly against the rocky walls. They soon came across a set of stairs leading down into the depths of the cave, and they cautiously made their way down. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a large cavern, filled with strange and mystical artifacts. In the center of the room, they saw a pedestal, upon which sat a small, shimmering object. It was the talisman they had been searching for. But as they approached the pedestal, they heard a low growl, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a wizard, his eyes filled with malice and a wand pointed directly at them. The family and Samuel immediately knew that they were in trouble. The wizard was powerful, and they were outnumbered. But they refused to back down. They knew that the talisman was too important to fall into the wrong hands. A fierce battle ensued, with spells flying left and right. The family and Samuel fought bravely, using their magic to defend themselves against the wizard's attacks. Finally, they managed to overpower the wizard, and he fled into the darkness, defeated. The family and Samuel had successfully retrieved the talisman, and they knew that they had made a powerful enemy. As they made their way out of the cave, they discussed what to do with the talisman. They knew that it was too powerful to be left in their possession, and they decided to take it to Amos for safekeeping. And so, they journeyed back to Amos's house, the talisman safely tucked away in their bags. But they knew that their adventure had only just begun, and that there were still many secrets of magic left to uncover. Upon arriving at Amos's house, the family and Samuel were greeted with a warm welcome. Amos listened intently as they told him of their journey and the battles they had faced. When they presented the talisman to him, Amos's eyes widened in amazement. "This is a very powerful artifact," Amos said, examining the talisman closely. "It must be kept safe, away from those who would seek to misuse its power." He carefully placed the talisman into a locked chest and assured the family and Samuel that it would be well protected under his watch. As they settled in for the night, the family and Samuel couldn't help but feel relieved that their mission was finally complete. But they also knew that they couldn't let their guard down just yet. The wizard who had attacked them in the cave was still out there, and they needed to be prepared for any further encounters. The next morning, Amos called the family and Samuel into his study. "I have some news that may interest you," he said, looking at them with a serious expression. "I received a message from the Wizard Council last night. It seems that the wizard who attacked you in the cave is none other than Zoltar." The family and Samuel gasped in shock. Zoltar was known throughout the wizarding world as a dangerous and powerful wizard, feared by many. "We believe that Zoltar is searching for the talisman," Amos continued. "It is imperative that we keep it out of his hands." The family and Samuel nodded in agreement, determined to do whatever it took to protect the talisman and prevent Zoltar from obtaining it. Amos went on to explain that there was a way to weaken Zoltar's powers, by obtaining a rare and powerful potion that could be found deep in the Forbidden Forest. The family and Samuel knew that the journey would be perilous, but they were determined to do whatever it took to stop Zoltar. And so, they set out once again, venturing into the dark and dangerous depths of the Forbidden Forest. As they walked, they couldn't help but wonder what other challenges and dangers lay ahead, and what secrets of magic they would uncover next. As they made their way through the dense forest, the family and Samuel kept a sharp eye out for any signs of danger. They had heard stories of dangerous creatures and magical traps hidden within the forest, and they were on high alert. As they walked, they came across a babbling brook, and the family stopped to take a drink of the cool water. Suddenly, they heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. Samuel drew his wand, and the family readied themselves for a fight. Out from the bushes stepped a small, furry creature, its eyes wide with fear. It looked up at them and let out a pitiful mewling sound. "It's just a harmless little creature," Samuel said, lowering his wand. The family approached the creature cautiously, and as they drew closer, they saw that it was injured. One of its legs was badly hurt, and it was struggling to move. Without hesitation, the family decided to help the creature. They used their magical skills to heal its injury and gave it some food and water. As they continued on their journey, the creature followed them, as if it had adopted them as its new family. They soon came across a rickety old bridge, spanning a deep ravine. As they stepped onto the bridge, it creaked and groaned under their weight. Halfway across the bridge, they heard a loud cracking sound, and the bridge began to give way beneath them. They clung to the ropes, desperately trying to keep their balance. But it was too late. The bridge collapsed, sending the family and Samuel plummeting into the ravine below. As they fell, they could see Zoltar's face leering at them from the top of the ravine. It was clear that he had set a trap for them. As they crashed to the ground, they felt a jolt of pain shoot through their bodies. They struggled to get up, but they were badly injured. Despite their injuries, they knew they had to keep going. They had come too far to give up now. With the help of their magic and the furry creature they had rescued, they began to climb out of the ravine, determined to continue their mission to stop Zoltar and protect the talisman. But as they climbed, they couldn't help but wonder what other dangers lay ahead, and if they would be able to overcome them. With their bodies aching from the fall, the family and Samuel struggled to climb out of the ravine. The furry creature they had rescued did its best to help, but it was clear that the injuries they had sustained were severe. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they made it out of the ravine and back onto solid ground. They collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath and trying to ease their pain. But they knew they couldn't rest for long. They had a mission to complete, and Zoltar was still out there, waiting for them. As they started to pick themselves up and dust themselves off, they heard a faint sound in the distance. It sounded like footsteps, getting closer and closer. They looked around frantically, trying to spot the source of the noise. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the trees, wielding a large staff. It was Zoltar. He sneered at them, his eyes glinting with malice. "I see you've made it this far," he said. "But you won't get any further. I have powers you can't even imagine, and I won't hesitate to use them." The family and Samuel stood their ground, their wands at the ready. They knew they were in for a tough fight, but they were determined to protect the talisman and stop Zoltar once and for all. The air crackled with magic as the two sides prepared to do battle. The furry creature they had rescued stood by their side, ready to fight alongside them. But as they readied themselves for the fight, they couldn't help but wonder if they were strong enough to defeat Zoltar and save the talisman. They would need all their courage and skill to come out on top. With a deep breath, they charged towards Zoltar, ready to face whatever lay ahead in the 5th chapter. Chapter 5, The Final Showdown. The battle between the family and Zoltar raged on. Spells were flying in every direction, causing trees to topple and rocks to crumble. Zoltar was a powerful wizard, but the family had something he didn't: teamwork. They worked together, casting spells that complemented each other and dodging Zoltar's attacks with grace and skill. The furry creature they had rescued also played a crucial role in the fight. It had healing powers, and it used them to help the family and Samuel when they were injured. Despite their strength, however, the family and Samuel were starting to tire. They had been battling for what seemed like hours, and Zoltar showed no sign of giving up. Finally, one of the family members had an idea. They had noticed that Zoltar's powers seemed to be coming from his staff. What if they could destroy it? They worked together to create a distraction, and then one of them managed to sneak up on Zoltar and grab the staff. Zoltar let out a scream of rage, but it was too late. Without his staff, he was powerless. The family and Samuel took advantage of the situation and quickly cast a spell to trap Zoltar. They had won. Breathless and exhausted, they looked at each other with relief and joy. They had saved the talisman and stopped Zoltar from using its power for evil. As they made their way back to the enchanted house, the furry creature they had rescued followed them. It seemed to have taken a liking to them and wanted to stay with them. Once they were back in the house, the furniture and other objects greeted them warmly. They had been worried about the family's safety and were relieved to see them back in one piece. The family and Samuel settled back into their routine, but with a newfound appreciation for the magic that surrounded them. They knew that they had faced a great challenge and had come out victorious because of their bravery and teamwork. But as they looked out at the enchanted garden and the mysterious forest beyond, they couldn't help but wonder what other adventures lay in store for them in the future. The family and Samuel cautiously approached the cottage, unsure of what they might find. They pushed open the door, and a bright light flooded out, momentarily blinding them. When their eyes adjusted, they saw a small room filled with books, potion bottles, and magical artifacts. In the center of the room was a pedestal with a glowing orb on top. As they approached the orb, they heard a voice. "You have done well to find me," the voice said. "I am the keeper of the talisman." The family and Samuel were stunned. They had thought they had saved the talisman, but it seemed that there was more to the story. The keeper of the talisman explained that the talisman had been split into 4 pieces, each with a different magical power. Zoltar had only possessed 1 piece, but there were 3 others out there somewhere. The keeper of the talisman told them that if they could find the other pieces and reunite them, they would gain access to a powerful spell that could grant them any wish they desired. The family and Samuel knew they had to find the other pieces. They thanked the keeper of the talisman and left the cottage, determined to embark on a new quest. As they walked back to the enchanted house, they couldn't help but wonder where the other pieces of the talisman might be. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were ready for the challenge. Little did they know that they would soon come face to face with new obstacles and adversaries on their quest for the remaining pieces of the talisman. The family and Samuel spent the next few days researching and brainstorming about where the other pieces of the talisman could be. They combed through books, talked to magical creatures, and even consulted with the talking furniture in their enchanted house, but they were still at a loss. Just when they were starting to lose hope, Samuel had an idea. He remembered a story his grandfather used to tell him about a powerful sorcerer who lived in a hidden castle in the mountains. Legend had it that the sorcerer possessed a powerful crystal that could control the elements. The family and Samuel decided to follow this lead and set out on a journey to find the hidden castle. They packed their bags, bid farewell to their enchanted house, and set off on their quest. The journey was long and arduous, but the family and Samuel were determined to succeed. They faced treacherous terrain, fierce magical beasts, and even a thunderstorm that seemed to be sent by some unknown force. But through it all, they persevered. Finally, after days of travel, they saw the castle in the distance. It was perched atop a towering mountain and seemed to glow in the moonlight. As they approached the castle, they were met with resistance. The sorcerer had placed powerful spells and enchantments around the castle, making it nearly impenetrable. But the family and Samuel were resourceful, and with their combined magical abilities, they were able to break through the sorcerer's defenses. They made their way to the castle's inner sanctum, where they found the sorcerer and his crystal. The sorcerer was a formidable opponent, but the family and Samuel were determined to claim the crystal and continue their quest for the remaining pieces of the talisman. The battle was long and grueling, but in the end, the family and Samuel emerged victorious. They had claimed the crystal and now had 2 pieces of the talisman in their possession. As they left the castle and began the journey back to their enchanted house, they couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had faced incredible obstacles and had come out on top. But they knew that their journey was far from over. They still had 2 more pieces of the talisman to find, and they didn't know what kind of challenges lay ahead. The family and Samuel braced themselves for whatever was to come, knowing that they had each other and their magic to rely on. As they walked back towards their enchanted house, the family and Samuel couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being followed. They looked around, but there was no one in sight. However, the hairs on the back of their necks stood up, and they knew that something was amiss. Just then, a shadowy figure appeared in front of them. It was cloaked in darkness, and its eyes glowed a menacing red. The family and Samuel drew their wands, ready for a fight. But the figure merely chuckled and said, "You may have 2 pieces of the talisman, but you'll never find the other 2. They're hidden away in places you'll never be able to reach." The family and Samuel tried to question the figure further, but it disappeared into thin air. They were left feeling uneasy, unsure of what to do next. They continued on their journey, but the encounter with the shadowy figure weighed heavily on their minds. They knew that they had to find a way to uncover the locations of the remaining talisman pieces and defeat whatever forces were trying to stop them. As they approached their enchanted house, they noticed that the furniture seemed agitated. They rushed inside to find that the house was in chaos. The talking furniture was in a frenzy, and the walls were pulsing with dark magic. The family and Samuel realized that they were facing an enemy much more powerful than they had ever encountered before. They knew that they had to act fast if they wanted to save their home and continue their quest for the talisman. They drew their wands and prepared for battle, hoping that their combined magic would be enough to defeat the dark forces that were threatening their enchanted house. The stakes were higher than ever before, and the family and Samuel knew that they had to give it their all if they wanted to come out on top. With determination in their hearts and magic at their fingertips, they braced themselves for the fight of their lives. Chapter 6: The Battle for the Enchanted House. The family and Samuel stood in the center of their enchanted house, surrounded by chaos. The furniture and objects were flying around the room, and the walls were shaking with dark energy. "We have to stop this," Samuel said, his wand at the ready. But before they could act, a figure materialized in front of them. It was the shadowy figure they had encountered earlier. "I warned you not to continue your quest," it said. "But you did not listen. Now you will suffer the consequences." With a flick of its wand, the shadowy figure sent a blast of dark energy towards the family and Samuel. They barely had time to react, and the blast sent them flying across the room. As they struggled to get back to their feet, the talking furniture began to rally. "We won't let you destroy our home," a particularly brave armchair shouted. The family and Samuel were heartened by the furniture's support, and they stood up, determined to fight back against the shadowy figure and its minions. They engaged in a fierce battle, casting spell after spell at their opponents. The air crackled with magic, and the room was filled with sparks and explosions. It was a close fight, but with their combined strength, the family and Samuel managed to defeat the shadowy figure and its minions. The dark magic dissipated, and the enchanted house returned to its peaceful state. As they caught their breath, the family and Samuel surveyed the damage. The furniture was scattered around the room, and some of the objects had been damaged in the fight. "We'll have to repair everything," the mother said, looking around at the mess. But the family and Samuel were relieved that they had managed to save their home. They knew that their quest for the talisman was far from over, but they were more determined than ever to continue. "We can't let anyone stand in our way," the father said, his voice filled with determination. "We have to find the remaining talisman pieces, no matter what it takes." The family and Samuel nodded in agreement. They knew that their journey would be difficult, but they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. They left their enchanted house, their wands at the ready, and set off on their next adventure. As they left the enchanted house, the family and Samuel found themselves on a narrow path leading through a dark forest. They walked cautiously, knowing that danger could be lurking around every corner. The trees towered above them, casting deep shadows on the ground. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only sounds were the rustling of the wind and the occasional hoot of an owl. As they walked deeper into the forest, the family and Samuel noticed that the trees were becoming more twisted and gnarled, as if they were trying to grab them with their spindly branches. "This doesn't feel right," the daughter said nervously. "We have to keep going," Samuel said firmly. "We're on a mission, and we can't let anything stop us." The family and Samuel walked on, their senses on high alert. Suddenly, they heard a low growling sound coming from the bushes. They froze, their wands at the ready. Out of the bushes emerged a pack of snarling, ferocious wolves. The family and Samuel backed away, but the wolves kept coming closer, their eyes glowing with a fierce hunger. "We have to fight," the father said, his voice steady. The family and Samuel stood back to back, their wands raised, and prepared for battle. The wolves charged at them, and the air filled with spells and the snarls of the animals. The fight was brutal, but the family and Samuel were determined to survive. They cast spells left and right, fending off the wolves' attacks and striking back with all their might. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the last of the wolves lay still on the ground. The family and Samuel were battered and bruised, but they had emerged victorious once again. "We have to keep moving," Samuel said, panting heavily. "We can't stay in one place for too long." The family and Samuel continued on their journey, moving deeper into the dark forest. They knew that they had to stay strong and focused if they were going to succeed in their quest for the talisman. Little did they know that they were being watched by eyes that glimmered in the darkness. The eyes of a powerful enemy, who was determined to stop them at any cost. As the family and Samuel pressed on through the dark forest, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent shivers down their spines. But they had a mission to complete, and they couldn't let fear get in the way. They walked on, their wands at the ready for whatever lay ahead. After what felt like hours of walking, they finally saw a light in the distance. As they drew closer, they realized it was a small cottage, nestled in a clearing. "Finally, some shelter," the mother said, a note of relief in her voice. But Samuel was hesitant. "Be careful," he warned. "This could be a trap." The family nodded, and they approached the cottage cautiously. As they knocked on the door, it creaked open slowly, revealing an old woman with a crooked smile. Come in," she cackled, beckoning them inside. The family and Samuel hesitated, but they were tired and hungry, and the prospect of shelter and a warm meal was too enticing to resist. They stepped inside, their wands still at the ready. The old woman led them to a small table, where she served them bowls of steaming soup and slices of crusty bread. They ate hungrily, grateful for the warm meal. But as they ate, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something was off about this old woman and her cozy cottage. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of hooded figures entered, their wands at the ready. "You thought you could escape us?" one of them sneered. The family and Samuel jumped up, their wands drawn. A fierce battle broke out, spells flying left and right. But the hooded figures were powerful, and they seemed to be winning. The family and Samuel were backed into a corner, their wands shaking in their hands. Just as all seemed lost, a bolt of lightning shot through the window, striking one of the hooded figures and sending them crashing to the ground. The family and Samuel turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, a cloak billowing around them. It was the mysterious wizard they had encountered before. "Quickly, we have to leave," he said urgently. The family and Samuel didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their belongings and ran out the door, following the wizard into the night. As they ran, they could hear the hooded figures shouting curses at them, their voices growing fainter as they disappeared into the darkness. Finally, the family and Samuel collapsed onto the ground, panting and exhausted. "What just happened?" the daughter asked, her voice shaking. "We were almost captured," Samuel replied grimly. "But we were saved, thanks to our new ally." The family nodded, grateful for their narrow escape. But they knew that the danger was far from over. They still had a long way to go, and a powerful enemy to defeat. They would have to stay strong, stay focused, and never give up. The fate of the world depended on it. As the clock struck midnight, the sound of footsteps could be heard echoing throughout the house. The furniture and objects quickly hushed themselves and listened carefully. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and in walked the family's arch-nemesis, the evil wizard Zephyr. Zephyr was a tall, dark figure with piercing eyes and a long, crooked nose. He sneered as he walked through the foyer and into the living room, where the family huddled together in fear. "What do you want, Zephyr?" the father of the family demanded, his voice trembling with anger. "I've come for the magical artifact that is hidden in this house," Zephyr replied, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "And I won't leave until I have it." The family knew exactly what Zephyr was talking about. The magical artifact was an ancient talisman that had been passed down through their family for generations. It had the power to grant immense magical abilities to whoever possessed it, and Zephyr had been trying to get his hands on it for years. The family refused to hand over the talisman, knowing that it could be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Zephyr grew increasingly angry and threatened to use his dark magic to take it by force. Just as it seemed like all hope was lost, a glimmer of light shone through the window. The family turned to see a group of magical beings flying towards the house. They were the guardians of the talisman, and they had come to protect it and the family who safeguarded it. A fierce battle broke out between the guardians and Zephyr, and the family watched in awe as powerful spells were cast and magical energy filled the room. In the end, the guardians emerged victorious, and Zephyr was banished from the house. As the family breathed a sigh of relief, they knew that their troubles were far from over. Zephyr would surely come back for the talisman, and they needed to find a way to keep it safe before it was too late. Title of Chapter 7: The Quest for a Hidden Safe Place. The family had grown accustomed to the strange happenings in their enchanted house, but they couldn't shake off the feeling that there was still something mysterious lurking within its walls. They had explored every room, every nook and cranny, but they couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. One day, as they were cleaning the attic, the youngest member of the family, Timmy, stumbled upon an old dusty chest. It was hidden behind some old crates, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "Hey, guys, come see what I found!" Timmy yelled excitedly. The family gathered around the chest, wondering what secrets it held. They tried to open it, but it was locked tight. "We need to find the key," said Mom, determinedly. They searched the attic high and low, but the key was nowhere to be found. Dad suggested looking in other rooms, thinking that perhaps the previous owners had hidden it somewhere else in the house. They searched the entire house, but the key was still nowhere to be found. Frustrated and exhausted, they decided to take a break and regroup. That night, as they were having dinner, they heard a strange noise coming from the walls. It sounded like a scratching sound, as if something was trying to get out. The family looked at each other, alarmed, and quickly made their way to the source of the sound. They followed the sound to a section of the wall that looked different from the rest. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if it hadn't been touched in years. Dad grabbed a hammer and started to knock on the wall. After a few hard hits, a piece of the wall fell off, revealing a small hidden room. The family looked at each other in disbelief. They had never seen this room before, and they couldn't imagine how it had gone unnoticed for so long. As they stepped into the room, they noticed an old safe in the corner. It was covered in cobwebs and rust, but it still looked sturdy. Mom tried the key from the old chest, and to their surprise, it fit perfectly. With bated breath, they slowly turned the key, and the safe door creaked open. Inside, they found an old journal that belonged to the previous owners of the house. It was filled with stories of the enchantments and secrets of the house. As they read through the pages, they realized that the house was not only enchanted but also cursed. They had to find a way to break the curse before it was too late. The family knew they had to act fast, but they also knew that breaking the curse would not be an easy task. They had a long journey ahead of them, and they were determined to find a way to save their home. As they walked through the dark, musty tunnel, they noticed a faint light in the distance. They quickened their pace and soon reached a small room that seemed to be carved out of the earth itself. In the center of the room stood an old wooden chest, covered in cobwebs and dust. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she realized that this must be the hidden safe place. They cautiously approached the chest, half expecting it to be booby-trapped, but it was unlocked. Inside, they found a letter written by Mia's great-grandfather. As they read the letter, they learned that the house was indeed cursed by an evil witch who had once lived in the area. According to the letter, the only way to break the curse was to find a certain magical amulet and return it to its rightful place. The amulet was said to be hidden in a nearby cave, but the cave was guarded by the witch's minions. Mia and her family knew that they had to be brave and face their fears if they wanted to break the curse and save their home. With renewed determination, they set out towards the cave, hoping that they would find the amulet before it was too late. As they walked towards the cave, Mia and her family couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The forest was eerily quiet, and they couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched. Finally, they reached the mouth of the cave. It was dark and foreboding, and they could hear strange noises coming from inside. Taking a deep breath, they ventured into the cave. The air was damp and musty, and the walls were covered in slimy moss. As they walked deeper into the cave, they could hear the sound of rushing water. They soon reached a large chamber, and there, in the center of the room, was the amulet. But it was guarded by two of the witch's minions, hideous creatures with sharp claws and teeth. Mia and her family knew they had to fight for the amulet. They drew their weapons and engaged the minions in a fierce battle. Mia's father and brother fought with swords, while her mother used her magic to cast spells. It was a difficult fight, but they emerged victorious. With the amulet in hand, they knew they had broken the curse and saved their home. As they made their way back to the house, they could feel the energy shifting around them. The house no longer felt heavy and oppressive, but light and welcoming. When they reached the house, they placed the amulet in its rightful place. Suddenly, the house shook, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Mia and her family could see that the house was restored to its former glory. The furniture was no longer talking, and the strange occurrences had ceased. Mia and her family could finally rest easy, knowing that they had saved their home from the clutches of the evil witch. As they continued to search for a safe place to hide, they heard footsteps coming from the hallway. The family quickly ducked behind a nearby bookshelf, but it was too late. The witch had found them. "Ah, there you are," the witch cackled, her eyes glowing with excitement. "I've been looking all over for you. Don't even think about trying to escape. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide." The family huddled together, scared and unsure of what to do next. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they heard a familiar voice calling out to them. "Quick, this way." It was the voice of their old friend, the talking armchair. "I've found a secret passage that leads to a hidden room. It's the perfect place to hide." The family wasted no time and followed the armchair down the secret passage. They finally arrived at a small, hidden room deep within the walls of the enchanted house. As they caught their breath and looked around, they realized that they had stumbled upon something incredible. The room was filled with ancient artifacts and magical objects, all hidden away from the outside world. "This is amazing," the mother whispered, in awe of the secret room they had discovered. "We have to explore more of this place." Little did they know that they were about to embark on an incredible adventure, full of danger and excitement. The quest to uncover the secrets of the enchanted house had only just begun. The family huddled together, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With the help of their magical friends, they would discover the hidden secrets of the house and protect themselves from the wicked witch. The journey ahead would be long and perilous, but they were ready for whatever lay ahead. The end of Chapter 7 left the reader in suspense, eager to find out what mysteries the family would uncover in the hidden room, and what dangers they would face on their quest to uncover the secrets of the enchanted house. Chapter 8, Unveiling the Mystery. Sophie was overwhelmed with emotions as she read the letter from her great-grandmother. It was an invitation to a hidden safe place that she had never heard of before. The letter explained that the safe place was located somewhere in the house, and only those who knew the secret could find it. Sophie's heart raced with excitement as she began to imagine what could be hidden there. Could it be treasure? Or maybe something that would help break the spell on the house? Whatever it was, Sophie was determined to find it. She shared the letter with her siblings, and they all agreed to start searching for the hidden safe place. They searched every corner of the house, from the attic to the basement, but they couldn't find any clues. Just as they were about to give up, they heard a faint whisper coming from one of the walls. They followed the sound until they reached a small hidden door. With trembling hands, Sophie turned the doorknob, and they all stepped into the dark, narrow tunnel. It was a tight squeeze, and they had to crouch down to fit, but they pressed on, their hearts pounding with anticipation. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally reached the end of the tunnel. There, they found a small room with a pedestal in the center. On top of the pedestal was a beautiful, glowing crystal. Sophie knew in her heart that this was the key to breaking the spell on the house. But as soon as she reached for the crystal, she heard a loud creaking sound. They all turned around to see the furniture and objects in the room beginning to move on their own. Sophie realized that they were not alone in the hidden safe place. There was someone, or something, else there with them. She tried to calm her siblings down as they huddled together, watching the objects move and shift around them. Suddenly, a voice spoke out from the darkness. "Who dares to disturb the peace of this safe place?" Sophie gulped, feeling a shiver run down her spine. It was clear that they were not alone in the hidden safe place, and whoever or whatever was there with them was not happy about their presence. She took a deep breath and spoke out with as much courage as she could muster, "We mean no harm. We are looking for a way to break the spell on our house." There was a moment of silence, and then the voice spoke again. "The crystal on the pedestal is the key. But be warned, whoever touches it must be pure of heart, or they will suffer the consequences." Sophie hesitated for a moment, but then she knew what she had to do. She reached for the crystal, her heart full of hope and determination. But as soon as she touched it, a blinding light filled the room, and she felt her body being pulled in different directions. She heard her siblings screaming, but then everything went dark. When Sophie opened her eyes, she found herself standing in the middle of a beautiful garden. The sun was shining, and there was a sense of peace and tranquility all around her. She turned around and saw her siblings standing beside her, looking just as surprised and confused as she was. They had no idea where they were or how they got there. Sophie knew that they had finally found the way to break the spell on their house. But as they stood there, taking in the beauty of the garden, she couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries and challenges lay ahead. As they approached the old oak tree, they noticed a small opening in the trunk. It was just big enough for a person to fit through. Emma carefully made her way inside, and the others followed closely behind. The space inside the tree was surprisingly large. The walls were lined with shelves filled with all sorts of trinkets and treasures. Emma gasped as she saw a glint of gold among the items on one of the shelves. "Look at this," she exclaimed, holding up a small golden key. "Maybe it's the key to the safe," suggested Max. They all hurriedly searched the shelves, looking for any other clues or items that might help them. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they found a small journal hidden among the books. "This must be the journal of the previous owners," said Emma as she opened it. They all huddled around her, eager to see what secrets it might hold. Emma read aloud, "To find the safe, you must first follow the winding stream to its source. Then, look for the tallest tree in the forest. At its base, you will find a hidden door. The key to this door is hidden in the branches of the tree." "So that's what the golden key is for," exclaimed Max. Excited and hopeful, they left the tree and followed the stream to its source. After a long and winding journey, they finally found the tallest tree in the forest. As they searched the branches, they soon found the key. With the key in hand, they eagerly made their way to the base of the tree, where they found the hidden door. Emma inserted the key and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dark staircase leading underground. Without hesitation, they began their descent into the unknown. As the family made their way deeper into the forest, they noticed the surroundings becoming increasingly unfamiliar. The trees grew denser, blocking out much of the sunlight, and the forest floor became covered in thick underbrush. After several hours of wandering, they stumbled upon a small clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing stood an old oak tree with a hollow trunk. The family approached the tree and, upon closer inspection, noticed a small door at the base of the trunk. Without hesitation, they opened the door and descended a spiral staircase leading deep into the earth. The staircase seemed to go on for ages until they finally reached the bottom and found themselves in a large, dimly lit chamber. The chamber was filled with old furniture, and many of the items looked like they had not been touched in years. Cobwebs clung to the walls and ceiling, and the air was thick with dust. Suddenly, a small mouse scurried across the floor, causing one of the family members to shriek in surprise. As they turned to leave, they noticed a small brass key lying on one of the dusty old chairs. It was unlike any key they had ever seen before. They knew they had to take the key with them, but they also knew they needed to be careful. As they made their way back up the spiral staircase, the family couldn't help but feel as if they were being watched. Once they emerged from the tree trunk, they quickly made their way back through the forest, constantly looking over their shoulders for any signs of danger. As they finally arrived back at the enchanted house, they realized that they had uncovered a new mystery. What was the key for? And what secrets did the hidden chamber hold? They knew they had to find out, but they also knew they needed to be careful. As they walked out of the hidden passageway, they heard a loud commotion upstairs. It sounded like the furniture and other enchanted objects were in a frenzy, trying to alert the family of an imminent danger. The trio knew they had to hurry and get out before the enchantments wore off. As they ran up the stairs, they could see that the house was now filled with dark clouds and a strange mist that seemed to be taking over every room. They knew that something or someone was behind this, and they had to find out what it was. As they made their way through the rooms, they noticed that some of the furniture and enchanted objects had been destroyed, and there were signs of a struggle. They realized that the family must have tried to fight back but failed. They reached the living room, and there, standing in the middle of the room, was a figure they had never seen before. It was a tall, menacing-looking creature, with red eyes and sharp claws. It was surrounded by a dark aura, which made it difficult for the trio to see clearly. The creature turned towards them, and they could feel its gaze on them. It spoke in a deep, menacing voice, "I see you've come to interfere with my plans. You will regret it." The trio knew that they were in grave danger and had to act fast. They looked at each other, nodded, and took out their wands. They knew that this would be a battle like no other, and they had to fight for the safety of the family and their home. Title of Chapter 9, The Final Showdown. The day of the final showdown had arrived. The family had spent the night before strategizing and preparing for what was to come. They had a plan, but they knew that it would not be easy. The enchanted furniture and objects had proven to be a formidable foe. As they made their way through the house, they could sense that something was different. The air was thick with magic, and the furniture seemed to be moving on its own, ready for battle. Suddenly, they heard a loud creaking noise, and the door to the basement swung open. They had never been down there before, but they knew that it was where the source of the enchantment lay. As they descended the stairs, they could see a faint glow emanating from the bottom of the staircase. They cautiously approached, unsure of what they would find. To their surprise, they found a room filled with magical artifacts and strange objects. In the center of the room, there was a large, ornate chest. It was covered in intricate carvings and seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. They knew that this was it. This was where the enchantment was coming from. They approached the chest, ready to break the spell once and for all. But just as they reached out to touch the chest, they heard a voice behind them. "You really thought it would be that easy?" The family turned around to see the witch standing in the doorway, a wicked grin on her face. "You may have found my secret chamber," she said, "but you will never break my spell." With a wave of her hand, the chest began to glow brighter, and the objects in the room began to levitate. The family knew that they were in for the fight of their lives. They readied themselves for battle, hoping that their combined strength would be enough to break the spell and defeat the witch once and for all. As soon as the family stepped inside the door, they saw the witch standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by swirling mist. She turned to face them, her eyes gleaming with an evil light. "I see you found my little home," she said, her voice cold and mocking. "You won't get away with this," Mr. Brown shouted, clenching his fists. The witch just laughed. "Oh, but I already have," she said. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." The family watched in horror as the witch raised her arms and began to chant in a language they couldn't understand. Suddenly, the furniture and other objects in the room began to shake and rattle, and the walls began to groan and creak. "We have to stop her," shouted Mrs. Brown. But before anyone could move, the witch sent a blast of dark energy at them, knocking them all to the ground. As they struggled to get back up, they saw the witch raise a hand and summon a massive demon from the depths of hell. The demon towered over them, its eyes glowing with an infernal fire. It roared with a deafening sound that shook the very foundations of the house. The family knew they had to act fast if they wanted to survive. With a nod of his head, Mr. Brown signaled to the furniture to come to life and help them fight the demon. The couch sprang to life and charged at the demon, slamming into it with all its might. The demon staggered back, but quickly regained its footing and struck the couch with a powerful blow. Meanwhile, the chairs and tables surrounded the demon, striking at it with their legs and arms. But the demon seemed almost invincible, shrugging off their attacks as if they were mere pinpricks. The family knew they needed a plan, and fast. They huddled together, whispering frantically as the demon advanced on them. Finally, they came up with a plan. Mr. Brown called out to the witch, distracting her attention from the fight. As she turned to face him, he darted forward and grabbed her wand. With a cry of triumph, he raised the wand high above his head and smashed it to the ground. There was a blinding flash of light, and the demon let out a horrible scream as it was sucked back into the depths of hell. The family watched in awe as the house began to collapse around them, the witch's magic fading away. As they ran outside, they saw the sun rising in the sky, the darkness of the witch's curse lifted forever. But even as they basked in the warmth of the sun, they knew that their adventure was not yet over. There were still many mysteries to uncover, and many dangers to face. And so, with a smile on their faces and courage in their hearts, they set out to explore the world beyond the enchanted house. The door to the study creaked open as the family cautiously entered, keeping a sharp eye out for any signs of danger. The room was empty, but something was different. The atmosphere felt heavy, oppressive, as if something terrible was about to happen. As they scanned the room, their eyes fell on a strange object that had not been there before. It was a small box, intricately decorated with silver and gold. The family approached it hesitantly, unsure of what to make of it. Without warning, the box began to shake, causing the family to jump back in surprise. Suddenly, the lid flew open, and a bright light shot out, blinding them momentarily. As their eyes adjusted, they saw the source of the light. A figure had appeared in the center of the room, tall and imposing, with eyes that glowed like embers. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" the figure boomed, its voice echoing through the room. The family stepped forward, their fear turning to determination. "We will not be afraid of you," the father said firmly. "We have faced many challenges to protect our home, and we will not back down now." The figure laughed, a deep, menacing sound that made their blood run cold. "You are brave, I will give you that. But you cannot defeat me. I am more powerful than you can imagine." The family stood their ground, ready to face whatever came their way. They had come too far to give up now. The figure lunged forward, but the family was ready. They fought back with all their strength, using everything they had learned in their previous battles. It was a long and difficult fight, but in the end, the family emerged victorious. The figure lay defeated at their feet, its power drained away. As they caught their breath, the family looked around the room, taking in their surroundings. The house seemed different somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from it. They knew that they had finally succeeded in their quest to restore peace to their home. But they also knew that their journey was not yet over. There would always be new challenges to face, new battles to fight. But as long as they stood together, they knew they could overcome anything. The door to the safe room creaked open, and the family stepped out, exhausted but relieved. They had successfully defeated the evil witch and freed the house from her curse. All the furniture and objects in the house were now back to their normal state, and the family could finally live peacefully without any mischief. As they walked through the hallway, they noticed a small wooden door that they had never seen before. Curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to open it. To their surprise, they found a flight of stairs leading down to a dark and eerie basement. As they descended down the stairs, they noticed a faint light coming from a corner of the room. As they approached the light, they saw a glowing crystal resting on a pedestal. It was pulsating with a strange energy that they had never seen before. Suddenly, the crystal began to vibrate, and a voice boomed through the room, "Welcome, travelers. You have found the crystal of power. It has been waiting for you." The family looked at each other in astonishment. What could this mean? And who was speaking to them? The voice continued, "You have been chosen to be the keepers of the crystal. It has the power to grant any wish, but it must be used wisely. The crystal is coveted by many, and you must keep it safe from those who seek to use its power for their selfish desires." The family was overwhelmed with excitement and fear. They had never imagined that they would stumble upon something so powerful. The voice spoke again, "You must guard the crystal with your lives, for the fate of the world rests upon it. Use its power wisely, and it will bring you great fortune. But be warned, for those who seek its power will stop at nothing to get it. The final showdown is coming, and you must be ready." The family looked at each other, knowing that they had a great responsibility ahead of them. They vowed to protect the crystal and use its power for good. As they made their way back up the stairs, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They knew that their lives would never be the same again, and they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The final showdown was coming, and they were determined to be victorious. Title of Chapter 10, A New Beginning. As the dust settled after the battle with the witch, the family slowly emerged from the hiding place. They all looked around in amazement as they saw the destruction that had been caused. The enchanted furniture had stopped moving, and the silence was almost eerie. But then, one by one, the pieces of furniture started to come to life again, as if waking from a deep sleep. The family looked at each other in confusion, not sure what to make of this sudden change. They cautiously approached the armchair and asked, "What is going on?" The armchair let out a sigh and replied, "It seems that the witch's spell has been broken. We are no longer under her control." The family looked at each other in relief and joy. Finally, they were free from the witch's curse. As they looked around, they saw that the house was in shambles. The furniture was torn apart, and the walls were cracked. It was clear that they had a lot of work to do to fix everything, but they were just happy to be alive. They worked tirelessly for the next few days to repair the damage. With the help of the enchanted furniture, they were able to restore the house to its former glory. And as they worked together, they became closer as a family. In the end, the family realized that they had been given a second chance. They had learned to appreciate each other more and had come to value the simple things in life. They were grateful for the love and support they had received from one another, and they knew that they could face anything as long as they had each other. As they sat together in their restored living room, surrounded by their enchanted furniture, they knew that they had truly found a new beginning. As the family huddled together in the safe room, they could hear the sound of chaos and destruction coming from the rest of the house. They knew that they were safe for the moment, but they also knew that they couldn't stay there forever. After a few moments of silence, they heard a knock on the door. It was the voice of the old oak tree that had helped them earlier. "It's safe to come out now," the tree said. "The furniture has taken care of the problem." Slowly and cautiously, the family emerged from the safe room. As they walked through the house, they were amazed to see that all of the furniture and objects that had been causing so much trouble were now in disarray, as if they had been in a fierce battle. But they had won. The family was relieved and grateful, and they thanked the furniture and objects for their help. From that day on, they all lived together in harmony, with a newfound respect and appreciation for the things around them. As the family settled back into their normal routine, they couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries the enchanted house might hold. But for now, they were content in the knowledge that they were safe and that their home was now a place of peace and magic. As the family worked together to dismantle the enchantments and restore their home, they discovered something unexpected. Among the debris of the damaged furniture, they found a small, ornate box. Inside the box was a letter, written in a flowing script. "Dearest family, if you are reading this, it means you have succeeded in breaking the curse that has plagued our home for generations. I am sorry for the hardships you have faced, but I hope that you have also discovered the joys of living in a home that truly cares for you. As a reward for your bravery and perseverance, I bequeath to you the contents of the safe hidden within the walls of this house. It contains a fortune beyond measure, as well as a set of instructions for using it to do good in the world. I trust that you will use this gift wisely and continue to uphold the values of love, compassion, and community that have sustained this home for so long. With love and gratitude. Your ancestor." The family was stunned. They had never suspected that there was a hidden safe in their home, let alone that it contained a fortune and a responsibility to use it for good. As they read through the instructions and discussed their plans, they felt a renewed sense of purpose and connection to their home. With a newfound appreciation for the magic that had brought them together, they vowed to continue to care for and protect their home, and to use their newfound wealth to make a positive impact on the world. As they settled back into their restored home, they felt a sense of peace and belonging that they had never experienced before. They knew that their journey had been difficult, but they were grateful for the lessons they had learned and the family they had become. As they got closer to the village, they could see smoke rising from some of the huts. Fear gripped them as they quickened their pace. When they finally arrived, they found chaos and destruction. Huts were burned to the ground, and villagers lay injured and dying on the ground. There were no signs of the attackers, but the devastation they had caused was clear. Zara and her team rushed to help the injured, using their medical skills to do what they could. They worked tirelessly through the night, doing their best to save as many lives as possible. As dawn broke, they finally had a chance to rest. Zara sat down next to one of the huts, her head in her hands. She couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. The village she had come to love had been destroyed, and the people she had come to call her friends were dead or injured. Suddenly, she heard a rustling in the bushes. She stood up, her heart racing, and drew her weapon. Out of the bushes stepped a man, wearing tattered clothing and looking exhausted. "Please," he said, holding up his hands in surrender. "I mean no harm. I was part of the group that attacked the village, but I couldn't do it anymore. I want to help." Zara hesitated for a moment before lowering her weapon. She could see the desperation in the man's eyes and knew that he was telling the truth. "Take me to your leader," she said. "We need to talk." The man nodded and led her through the jungle to a hidden campsite. There, she met the leader of the group, a woman named Mariana. As Sarah stepped outside, the sun had just set, and the sky was a deep shade of purple. She took a deep breath and looked around. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, but she knew that things would never truly be the same. Just as she was about to turn and head back inside, she saw something glint in the distance. It was a small, shiny object on the ground. Curiosity getting the better of her, she walked over to investigate. As she got closer, she saw that it was a small key. A chill ran down her spine as she realized what it was for. Could it be the key to the safe that her father had hidden so long ago? Excitement and fear coursed through her veins as she picked up the key and turned it over in her hands. She knew that the only way to find out was to follow the clues and embark on a new adventure. With a determined look on her face, Sarah pocketed the key and headed back inside to start her search. Little did she know, she was about to uncover secrets that would change her life forever. The end of chapter 10 left Sarah with a new sense of purpose and the desire to uncover the truth about her family's past. She was excited but also nervous about what she might find. As she began her search for the hidden safe, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What if she found something she wasn't ready to face? With each clue she uncovered, Sarah's curiosity grew, and she found herself delving deeper into the secrets of her family's past. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous the journey became. But Sarah was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. She knew that her father had hidden something important in that safe, and she needed to find out what it was. As she followed the clues and pieced together the puzzle, Sarah found herself facing her biggest challenge yet, a final showdown that would determine her fate and the fate of her family. Chapter 11: The Final Revelation. After the intense confrontation with the intruders, the group was left feeling drained and uneasy. They gathered in the living room, still reeling from the shock of discovering the hidden passage and the events that followed. As they sat in silence, Elizabeth's phone beeped with a notification. She hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of her, and she checked her messages. Her face turned pale as she read the message. "Guys, we need to talk," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's wrong?" asked Jack, noticing the distress on her face. "It's from the real estate agent who sold us this house. She just messaged me saying that she has some important information to share with us regarding the previous owners of this property," Elizabeth explained. Everyone exchanged concerned glances. What could the real estate agent possibly know that was so important? They agreed to meet with her the following day. The next morning, they arrived at the real estate agent's office, anxious to find out what she knew. The agent, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, ushered them into her office. "I know why you're here," she said, getting straight to the point. The previous owners of the property were involved in some shady business dealings. They were part of a cult that believed in sacrificing human lives to gain power and wealth. The group was stunned, unable to believe what they were hearing. "We had no idea," said Sarah, her voice trembling. "I understand," the agent said sympathetically. "They kept their activities well hidden. But I felt it was important to tell you, especially after what happened yesterday. You should be careful, and if you ever feel unsafe, don't hesitate to contact the authorities." As they left the real estate agent's office, the group couldn't help but feel like they were in the middle of a horror movie. The idea that they were living in a house once owned by a cult was terrifying. They decided to investigate further, hoping to uncover more information about the previous owners and the cult they belonged to. Their investigation led them to an old library, where they found several books about the cult and its rituals. The more they read, the more horrified they became. They discovered that the cult believed in sacrificing young, innocent lives to gain power and wealth. As they were about to leave the library, Jack stumbled upon an old map hidden behind a bookshelf. It showed a hidden passage that led to a secret underground chamber. The group looked at each other, knowing that they had to investigate further. With a newfound determination, they returned to the house and searched for the entrance to the secret chamber. After some intense searching, they finally found the hidden door. With bated breath, they descended into the underground chamber. What they found left them speechless. The chamber was filled with gruesome artifacts, including a human skull and bones. They realized that they had stumbled upon the cult's sacrificial chamber. As they stood there in horror, a loud noise echoed through the chamber, causing them to turn around. To their shock, they saw a group of hooded figures approaching them. It was the cult, and they had been discovered. The group prepared for the final showdown, knowing that they were fighting for their lives. As the group sat in stunned silence, Sarah continued to speak. "Before your parents died, they were part of a secret society dedicated to protecting powerful artifacts that could have catastrophic consequences if they fell into the wrong hands. They called themselves the Guardians of Truth." The room fell silent once again, and everyone was looking at each other in disbelief. "But why didn't they tell us?" asked John. "Your parents knew the danger that came with their mission. They wanted to protect you from it, so they kept it a secret," Sarah replied. "What do we do now?" asked Emma. "We have to continue their mission and protect the artifact," said Sarah. "I can help you. I am a guardian of truth, and it's my duty to help you finish what your parents started." The group looked at each other, unsure of what to say. "We're in," said Michael. The rest of the group nodded in agreement. "Good," said Sarah. "We have to move fast. The artifact is still in danger, and we have to make sure it's secure." The group got up from the table and followed Sarah out of the room, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead of them. As they left the house, Sarah turned to the group. "Your parents would be proud of you," she said with a small smile. The group felt a sense of determination wash over them. They were going to finish their parents' mission and protect the artifact, no matter what it took. The adventure had only just begun. With the help of her friends, Amanda carefully made her way down the dark, winding tunnel. She was anxious to find out what the final revelation would be. The walls were slick with moisture and the air was thick with the musty smell of old earth. As they approached the end of the tunnel, Amanda's heart began to race. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that it was going to be something big. As they emerged from the tunnel, they found themselves standing in a large, dimly lit chamber. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, and on top of it was a small, intricately carved box. Amanda approached the pedestal and carefully lifted the box. It was surprisingly heavy, and she could feel a strange energy emanating from it. As she slowly opened the box, she saw that it contained a single, glowing crystal. The crystal was pulsing with a bright, blue light, and as Amanda stared at it, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was soft and gentle, yet somehow powerful. "Amanda," the voice said, "you have done well. You have proven yourself to be a true warrior, and for that, you shall be rewarded." Amanda looked around the room, but she couldn't see anyone. The voice seemed to be coming from the crystal itself. "Take this crystal," the voice continued, "and use its power to bring light to the darkness. With it, you can heal the wounds of the earth and restore balance to the world." Amanda nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility that had been placed upon her. She carefully placed the crystal back into the box and tucked it into her bag. As she turned to leave the chamber, she realized that the other members of her team had already gone ahead. She hurried to catch up with them, eager to share her new knowledge and the incredible power of the crystal. But she also knew that with great power came great responsibility. She would have to use the crystal wisely, and with care, or risk causing even more harm. Amanda took a deep breath and walked confidently out of the chamber, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the group entered the hidden chamber, they were greeted with an overwhelming sight. The walls were lined with ancient artifacts, and the center of the room held a large pedestal with a glowing crystal resting on top. "This is it," whispered Sarah, "this is the crystal we've been searching for." As they approached the pedestal, the crystal began to emit a blinding light, and they shielded their eyes. Suddenly, the light subsided, and they saw that the crystal had split in two, revealing a small, rolled-up parchment inside. "What is this?" asked Jack, carefully unrolling the parchment. "It's a map," exclaimed Sarah, "a map to the hidden city of Atlantis." The group couldn't believe their luck. They had finally found the legendary city they had been searching for, and the map would lead them straight to it. But their excitement was short-lived as they heard a commotion from outside the chamber. It was the sound of approaching footsteps. "We need to go, now," shouted Sarah. They quickly gathered the artifacts they had found and rushed towards the exit, but they were met with armed guards blocking their path. "Give us the crystal and the artifacts," demanded the leader of the guards. The group knew they were outnumbered and outmatched, but they weren't willing to give up the fruits of their labor without a fight. The leader of the group stepped forward, ready to defend their discovery with all their might. As they stood there in shock, trying to process what they had just discovered, a loud crash echoed through the room. They turned around to see the door had been kicked open, and a group of armed men entered, led by none other than the mastermind behind the entire plot. He smirked as he approached them, gloating over his apparent victory. But before he could say a word, the ground beneath them shook violently, causing the room to tremble. The mastermind stumbled and fell, but quickly regained his composure and ordered his men to attack. A fierce battle ensued, with our heroes fighting valiantly against their opponents. But just as they seemed to be gaining the upper hand, a blinding light filled the room, and everything went dark. When they finally came to, they found themselves in an unfamiliar location, surrounded by a group of people who seemed to be friendly. They were told that they had been rescued by a secret organization that had been monitoring the mastermind's activities and had been waiting for the right moment to strike. As they were debriefed on what had happened, they learned the shocking truth behind the mastermind's motives and the true extent of his plan. They were given access to classified information and resources that would help them continue the fight against evil. With this newfound knowledge, they set out on a new mission, determined to stop anyone who threatened the safety and freedom of humanity. The battle may have been won, but the war against darkness was far from over. Excited and full of resolve, they set out to face whatever lay ahead in their quest for justice and peace. The end of Chapter 11 left them standing on the brink of a new adventure, ready to tackle whatever challenges may come their way in Chapter 12. Chapter 12, A New Beginning. Sophie and Jack stood on the cliff overlooking the ocean, taking in the stunning view. It had been a few weeks since the events at the lighthouse, and things were finally starting to settle down. Sophie turned to Jack. "I can't believe we made it through all of that. It feels like a lifetime ago." Jack nodded. "Yeah, it was definitely a wild ride. But I'm just glad we're both okay." Sophie smiled. "Me too. And thanks for always having my back, Jack. I couldn't have done any of it without you." Jack grinned. "Of course, Sophie. That's what friends are for." They stood in silence for a few moments, taking in the peacefulness of the moment. But Sophie knew that there was still something weighing on Jack's mind. "Hey, Jack. What's on your mind?" Jack hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "I can't stop thinking about what Mary said. About the possibility of more descendants out there. What if there are others like us, who are in danger and don't even know it?" Sophie took a deep breath. "I know it's scary to think about. But we can't spend our lives worrying about what-ifs. We just have to focus on living in the present and being there for each other." Jack nodded. "You're right. And I have a feeling that we'll be ready if and when that time comes." Sophie smiled. "I have no doubt about that, Jack." As they turned to leave the cliff, Sophie felt a sense of hope and anticipation for what the future may hold. She didn't know what was in store for them, but she was ready to face it with Jack by her side. It was a new beginning, and she was ready for whatever lay ahead. As they walked down the hallway, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The silence was deafening, and the dim lighting only added to the eerie atmosphere. Suddenly, they heard a faint noise coming from a room at the end of the hallway. It sounded like someone was shuffling around inside. Sarah and David exchanged a look and cautiously made their way towards the room. As they got closer, the noise became louder and more distinct. David slowly pushed open the door, and they both peered inside. The room was completely empty except for a small table in the center. On the table, they saw a piece of paper with something written on it. As they walked closer, they saw that it was a letter addressed to them. Sarah nervously picked up the letter and began to read it aloud. "To my dearest Sarah and David. If you are reading this, then I am already gone. I hope that you can forgive me for what I have done. I knew that you would eventually find me, and I couldn't bear the thought of facing you both after what I had done. Please know that I did it all for you. I hope that you can find it in your hearts to understand and forgive me. Love always. Mom." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she finished reading the letter. She couldn't believe that her mother was gone. David put his arm around her, and they both stood there in silence for a moment, lost in their thoughts and grief. Suddenly, they heard footsteps coming towards the room. They quickly folded up the letter and slipped it into Sarah's pocket before turning to face whoever was coming. As the footsteps grew closer, Sarah and David braced themselves for the worst. The group made their way through the underground tunnels, feeling as if they had been walking for hours. They had encountered various traps and obstacles along the way, but each time they managed to find a way around them. As they reached the end of the tunnel, they saw a small room with a pedestal in the center. On top of the pedestal was the last piece of the artifact they had been searching for. However, standing in front of the pedestal was the mysterious figure that had been haunting them throughout their journey. He was dressed in all black with a hood over his face, making it impossible to see his features. "You made it this far," the figure said, his voice echoing through the room. "But you will not be leaving with the artifact." The group stood ready for a fight, but before they could make a move, the figure lifted his hand and the room began to shake. The walls crumbled, revealing a massive chamber filled with ancient ruins and artifacts. The figure stepped back, revealing a throne at the center of the chamber. Sitting on the throne was an old man, dressed in rich robes with a crown on his head. The old man spoke in a voice that seemed to come from all around them, "You have done well to come this far. But the artifact belongs to me." The group hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then, Sophia stepped forward and said, "We have risked everything to find this artifact. We cannot just give it up now." The old man smiled and said, "Very well. But be warned, there are consequences to taking what is not rightfully yours." With those words, the ground beneath them shook once again, and the old man disappeared, leaving the group alone in the chamber. They retrieved the artifact and made their way back to the surface, wondering what the old man's warning meant. But for now, they were just grateful to have completed their mission. With the information they had gathered from the letter, they realized that the key to defeating the mysterious organization lay in the ancient ruins deep in the jungle. They set off on a dangerous expedition, braving treacherous terrain and wild animals. After days of trekking, they finally reached the ruins. As they made their way inside, they were met with a maze of dark corridors and hidden chambers. They had to be careful not to trigger any traps or alarms that might alert the organization of their presence. Finally, they stumbled upon a chamber that seemed to hold the answers they were seeking. There was a large stone pedestal in the center of the room, and on it sat an ornate box. When they opened the box, they found a strange device that they couldn't quite make sense of. As they were examining the device, they suddenly heard footsteps echoing down the corridor. They quickly realized that they had been discovered and had no time to escape. They prepared themselves for a final showdown with the organization, hoping that the device in their possession would give them an edge in the battle to come. Oliver sat down on the bench, his heart racing. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. The woman he thought was his mother was actually his aunt, and his real mother was out there somewhere. He sat there for a while, lost in thought. He wondered how he would find his mother and what had happened to her. He knew he had to start looking, but he didn't know where to start. As he sat there, lost in thought, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around and saw a man standing behind him. The man was tall and muscular, with short black hair and a thick beard. "Are you Oliver?" the man asked. Oliver nodded, wondering who this man was and how he knew his name. "I've been looking for you," the man said. "My name is John. I'm a private investigator, and your mother hired me to find you." Oliver's heart leaped with joy. He couldn't believe it. His mother had hired a private investigator to find him. "She's been looking for you for years," John said. "She's never given up hope of finding you." Oliver felt a lump in his throat. He had never known that his mother was still looking for him. He had always assumed that she had given up on him. "Where is she?" Oliver asked eagerly. "I don't know," John said. "But I have a lead. There's a woman in New York who might know where she is. I'm heading there tomorrow. Are you coming with me?" Oliver didn't hesitate. He knew that he had to find his mother, no matter what it took. "Yes," he said. "I'm coming with you." And with that, Oliver and John set off on a journey that would take them across the country, in search of the woman who might hold the key to finding Oliver's mother. After weeks of investigation and dangerous encounters, Emma and Jack finally got a lead on the location of the mysterious artifact. It was said to be hidden in an old temple deep in the Amazon rainforest. The journey was long and treacherous, but Emma and Jack were determined to complete their mission. They hired a team of experienced guides and set out into the dense jungle. As they approached the temple, they could feel the tension in the air. It was as if something was warning them to turn back. But they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Finally, they arrived at the temple entrance, but it was heavily guarded by a group of armed men. Emma and Jack knew they had to be careful if they were going to make it past the guards and into the temple. They came up with a plan and managed to sneak past the guards undetected. But as they made their way deeper into the temple, they realized that they were not alone. Someone or something was following them, and they could hear the sound of footsteps getting closer and closer. Suddenly, they were ambushed by a group of armed men, led by none other than the wealthy collector who had hired them in the first place. It turned out that he had been manipulating them all along, using them to find the artifact for his own selfish purposes. But Emma and Jack were not going down without a fight. In the chaos that ensued, they managed to overpower the armed men and make a run for it. But they knew they couldn't escape forever. Now, as they raced through the temple, they had to find a way to outsmart their pursuers and uncover the truth behind the artifact before it was too late. Chapter 13, The Reckoning. As the sun began to set on the horizon, Emma and James made their way to the abandoned warehouse where they had arranged to meet with the rest of their group. They were determined to put an end to the dangerous game that had been played by the criminal organization and bring justice to those who had been affected by their actions. As they approached the entrance of the warehouse, they noticed that the doors were slightly ajar. They cautiously pushed them open and made their way inside, ready for anything that might come their way. The inside of the warehouse was dimly lit, and the group could barely make out their surroundings. They cautiously made their way through the maze of crates and boxes, trying to avoid making any noise that might alert their enemies. As they rounded a corner, they were suddenly faced with a group of armed men, all of them pointing their weapons directly at Emma and James. The group froze, unsure of what to do next. One of the men stepped forward, a sneer on his face. "Well, well, well. Look who decided to show up," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Emma stepped forward, her voice firm. "We're here to put an end to this." "To put an end to your game," she said, her eyes flashing with determination. The man laughed, a cruel sound that echoed throughout the warehouse. "And just how do you plan on doing that?" he asked, his gun still trained on Emma. James stepped forward, his own gun drawn. "We have evidence of your illegal activities. We have the proof we need to bring you and your organization down," he said, his voice steady. The man's sneer turned into a scowl, and he motioned for his men to advance. The group was suddenly surrounded, their weapons at the ready as they prepared for the final showdown. The air was thick with tension as the two sides faced off, each one determined to emerge victorious. It was a fight that would determine the fate of the city, and the group knew that they could not afford to lose. With a deep breath, Emma signaled for her group to attack, and the battle began. As soon as Alex entered the room, he knew something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, and everyone seemed to be on edge. The only person who seemed calm was Clara, but even she had a stern look on her face. "What's going on?" Alex asked, trying to sound casual. "Sit down," Clara said, gesturing to a chair. "We need to talk." Alex sat down, feeling uneasy. He had a sinking feeling in his stomach that he knew what was coming. "Alex, we've been investigating you," Clara said, her voice cold. "And we've discovered some disturbing things." Alex's heart started racing. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've found evidence that suggests you've been working with the enemy," Clara said, leaning forward. "We found documents and recordings that implicate you in a plot to sabotage our mission." Alex felt like the room was spinning. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's not true," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have proof, Alex," Clara said. "You need to explain yourself. Now." Alex tried to gather his thoughts, but his mind was a blur. He knew he had to be careful with his words. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, shaking his head. Clara narrowed her eyes. "You're lying," she said. "We have enough evidence to charge you with treason." Alex felt like he was suffocating. He couldn't believe this was happening. "Please," he said, his voice shaking. "You have to believe me. I'm not working with the enemy." Clara looked at him for a long moment, then leaned back in her chair. "We'll give you a chance to prove yourself," she said. "But if we find any more evidence, you're done." Alex nodded, feeling like a weight had been lifted off his chest. He knew he had to clear his name and find out who was behind the false accusations against him. As he left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He knew he had to be careful, but he didn't know who he could trust. As they reached the top of the hill, they saw a breathtaking sight. The sun was rising over the mountains, casting a warm glow over the valley. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and gold. It was the most beautiful sunrise they had ever seen. But their joy was short-lived as they saw something else on the horizon. In the distance, they could make out a dark, ominous cloud that seemed to be moving towards them. As it got closer, they realized that it was a massive swarm of locusts. The buzzing sound was deafening, and the ground was shaking with their approach. Panicked, they ran down the hill, trying to escape the swarm. But the locusts were relentless, and soon they were surrounded. They covered everything in their path, devouring all the vegetation in their way. As they tried to find shelter, they stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. It was old and decrepit, but it was their only hope. They rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind them. It was dark and musty inside, and they could hear the locusts buzzing outside. They huddled together, praying that the swarm would pass them by. After what seemed like an eternity, the buzzing stopped. They cautiously opened the door and looked outside. The locusts had moved on, leaving behind a trail of destruction. But their relief was short-lived as they saw something else on the horizon. A massive storm was brewing, and it was headed straight towards them. They knew that they had to find shelter, and fast. As they ran through the valley, trying to find a place to hide, they saw something that made their hearts skip a beat. In the distance, they could see a small town with a church at the center. It was their only hope. They ran towards the town, their legs aching, their lungs burning. But they knew that they had to keep going. They had come too far to give up now. As they reached the town, they collapsed on the steps of the church, exhausted but relieved. They had made it through the locusts and the storm, and they knew that they were one step closer to finding the hidden treasure. As Sarah and James continued their journey through the dense forest, they noticed that the trees were starting to thin out, and the ground beneath them became rocky and uneven. They had been walking for hours, and their feet were sore and blistered. Just as they were about to take a rest, Sarah heard a faint humming sound in the distance. She strained her ears to listen, and the sound grew louder and more distinct. It was the sound of machinery, and it was coming from a clearing up ahead. They approached the clearing cautiously and peered through the thick foliage. There, in the center of the clearing, was a small, run-down factory. The windows were boarded up, and the doors were locked, but smoke was rising from the chimney. Sarah and James exchanged a look of curiosity and apprehension. They both knew that they needed to investigate further, so they made their way towards the factory. As they got closer, they saw a group of men in dark suits and sunglasses standing guard outside the factory. They looked menacing, and Sarah and James knew that they needed to be careful if they wanted to get closer to the building. They huddled together and came up with a plan. James would create a distraction while Sarah snuck inside the factory to see what was going on. James started making loud noises and running around the clearing, pretending to be a wild animal. The guards were distracted, and Sarah used the opportunity to sneak past them and enter the factory through a side entrance. Once inside, Sarah's jaw dropped in amazement. The factory was filled with strange, high-tech machinery and equipment that she had never seen before. She moved stealthily through the factory, taking care not to make any noise. As she crept closer to the heart of the factory, she heard the sound of voices. She pressed herself against the wall and peered around the corner, where she saw a group of men in lab coats huddled around a large machine. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that she had stumbled upon something big. She knew that she needed to gather as much information as possible and get out of there before she was discovered. Just then, one of the lab-coated men turned around and spotted her. Sarah froze in terror, but before she could make a run for it, the man shouted out an alarm. Sarah sprinted back towards the entrance, dodging security guards and machinery as she ran. She burst out of the factory and ran towards James, who was waiting for her on the edge of the clearing. "We need to get out of here now," she shouted as she grabbed his hand and pulled him towards the trees. "We found something big, something that could change everything." As the group continued on their journey, they stumbled upon a hidden cave deep in the forest. Inside, they found clues that led them to believe that the treasure they had been searching for was hidden nearby. Excitement filled the air as they set out to follow the clues. But as they drew closer to the supposed location of the treasure, they began to feel a sense of unease. It was almost as if someone was watching them. Suddenly, they heard a rustling in the bushes behind them. They turned around to see a group of armed men approaching them. "You should have stayed away," one of the men growled. The group realized they had been led into a trap. They were outnumbered and outmatched. But they refused to give up without a fight. As the battle raged on, one of the group members stumbled upon a hidden passage. With no other options, they made a break for it, hoping to find a way out. But what awaited them on the other side of the passage was beyond their wildest dreams. The treasure they had been searching for all along was there, in all its glory. Their hearts filled with joy and relief, the group couldn't believe their luck. But as they admired their newfound treasure, they couldn't help but wonder what other dangers lay ahead. Little did they know, the real battle had only just begun. The group knew they couldn't let their guard down. They had come too far to let someone else take their treasure away from them. With a renewed sense of determination, they set out to protect their treasure and defend themselves against any who would try to take it from them. The final showdown was approaching, and they were ready for whatever came their way. Chapter 14: The Final Plan. The group sat in a circle, their faces grim with determination. They had come too far to give up now, but the odds were stacked against them. They knew that their final plan needed to be flawless, or they risked losing everything. Ethan broke the silence. "Okay, here's what we know. The facility is heavily guarded, and getting inside won't be easy. But once we're in, we need to move fast." Megan nodded. "The main control room is our target. If we can get there, we can shut down the system and stop the broadcast." "But how do we get past the guards?" asked Sam. Ethan leaned forward. "I've been working on a distraction. It won't last long, but it should be enough to get us inside." Megan raised an eyebrow. "What kind of distraction?" Ethan grinned. "I have a few tricks up my sleeve." The group spent the next few hours going over the plan in detail. They identified potential weaknesses and discussed contingencies for every scenario. As the sun began to rise, they huddled together for one final pep talk. "We can do this," Ethan said. "We've come too far to fail now. Remember why we're doing this. For the truth. For justice." They broke apart, gathering their gear and making their final preparations. The tension was palpable as they made their way to the facility. As they approached the gates, Ethan set his plan into motion. Explosions rocked the air, and the guards rushed to investigate. The group slipped past them, moving quickly and quietly towards the control room. They encountered some resistance along the way, but they were prepared for it. They fought their way through, relying on each other and their training. Finally, they reached the control room. Megan went to work, typing furiously at the keyboard. Sam stood guard, ready to take on anyone who tried to stop them. And then, it was done. The broadcast was shut down. The truth was out. The group exchanged looks of relief and satisfaction. They had done it. They had taken down the corrupt organization that had been manipulating the truth for too long. But as they made their way back to their safe house, they knew that their work wasn't over. They had uncovered a vast web of lies and deception, and they needed to keep fighting to bring it all down. The group took a moment to catch their breath, but they all knew that the battle was far from over. They had won this battle, but the war was still raging on. They were ready for whatever came next, knowing that together they could face any challenge. After hours of hiking, they finally reached the base of the mountain. They looked up, and it was daunting. The peak was shrouded in mist, and the climb looked treacherous. "We have to keep going," said Maya, her voice resolute. Jared and Luke nodded, and they started the ascent. The climb was challenging, and the air was thin. They had to stop multiple times to catch their breaths. But they pushed on, and after hours of climbing, they finally reached the summit. The view was breathtaking. They could see the entire valley below, and the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. As they took a moment to catch their breath and enjoy the view, they noticed something strange. There was a small structure at the edge of the summit, and it looked like a hut. "Let's go check it out," said Jared, pointing to the structure. They made their way towards the hut, and as they approached, they could hear voices coming from inside. They cautiously opened the door and stepped inside. To their surprise, they found themselves face to face with the two missing scientists, Dr. Singh and Dr. Patel. "We've been waiting for you," said Dr. Singh, a glint in his eye. "What do you mean?" asked Maya, confused. "We know why you're here." "You're searching for the artifact," said Dr. Patel. "How do you know about that?" asked Luke, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. "We've been studying the legends and myths of this region for years. We know more about the artifact than anyone else," said Dr. Singh. "Tell us what you know," demanded Jared. Dr. Patel took a deep breath and began to speak. As they reached the top of the hill, they could see the massive castle looming in the distance. The gates were open, and there was a stream of people going in and out. It was clear that the castle was bustling with activity. As they approached, they could see that the castle was heavily guarded. The soldiers at the gate were heavily armed, and there were archers on the castle walls. This wasn't going to be easy. They waited until the guards were distracted and then made a run for the gate. They were quick, but not quick enough. The guards spotted them and immediately raised the alarm. "We have to move quickly," said Jack, as they dodged arrows and ran towards the castle walls. They could hear the sound of horses approaching, and they knew they had to hurry. They reached the castle walls and began to climb. The stones were slick and slippery, and they had to move quickly to avoid falling. They could hear the horses getting closer, and they knew they were running out of time. Finally, they reached the top of the wall and looked down. There were soldiers waiting for them below. It was now or never. "We have to jump," said Kate. "Trust me." They took a deep breath and jumped. They fell fast, but Kate had been right. They landed in a haystack, breaking their fall. They quickly got up and ran towards the castle, dodging soldiers and arrows as they went. Finally, they reached the door to the castle. It was heavily guarded, but they managed to sneak past the guards and slip inside. The inside of the castle was just as heavily guarded as the outside. They had to be careful not to be spotted by any of the guards as they made their way through the castle. As they moved deeper into the castle, they could hear the sound of voices up ahead. They cautiously crept forward and peered around the corner. What they saw made their blood run cold. In the center of the room stood the evil sorcerer, holding a glowing orb in his hand. The orb pulsed with a sickly green light, and it was clear that the sorcerer was using it to control the minds of those around him. "We have to stop him," whispered Jack. But before they could make a move, the sorcerer turned and looked straight at them. His eyes blazed with anger, and he pointed his wand at them. "Get them," he shouted. The guards rushed forward, and the battle began. The sorcerer was powerful, but Jack and Kate fought with all their might. They dodged spells and parried blows, determined to reach the sorcerer and destroy the orb. Finally, they managed to get close enough. Kate leapt forward and knocked the orb out of the sorcerer's hand, sending it flying across the room. Jack seized the opportunity and lunged forward, his sword aimed straight at the sorcerer's heart. With a final, desperate scream, the sorcerer fell to the ground, defeated. The guards immediately surrendered, and the battle was over. Panting and exhausted, Jack and Kate looked at each other, relief flooding their faces. They had done it. They had saved the kingdom. But as they turned to leave the castle, they saw something that made their blood run cold. The sorcerer's body was gone, and in its place lay a note. A note that read, "You may have defeated me, but I am not done yet. Beware, for I will return." As they walked through the dark alley, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She had a strange feeling that they were being watched, and every rustle in the shadows made her jump. Suddenly, they heard footsteps behind them. Emily turned around to see a group of people in dark clothing, their faces obscured by masks. She grabbed Jake's arm and whispered urgently, "We need to run." They broke into a sprint, the group of strangers in hot pursuit. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as they weaved through the maze-like streets. Finally, they ducked into a small alcove and waited, holding their breath as the group of strangers ran past them. As soon as they were out of sight, Emily and Jake took off again, running as fast as they could. But they knew they couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan. "Let's head to the old abandoned warehouse on the edge of town," Jake suggested. "We could hide out there until things calm down." Emily nodded, and they made their way towards the warehouse. When they arrived, they found it empty and deserted, the perfect hiding spot. They barricaded the doors and windows, settling into a corner to catch their breath. But their relief was short-lived. They heard footsteps approaching from outside the warehouse. The group of strangers had found them. "We have to fight," Emily said, determination in her voice. "We can't let them take us." Jake nodded, and they prepared to defend themselves. As the door burst open and the group of strangers charged in, Emily and Jake fought with all their might, determined to protect each other and their mission. After what seemed like hours, the group of strangers lay defeated on the ground. Emily and Jake were battered and bruised, but they had emerged victorious. As they caught their breath and surveyed the damage, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. They still had a long way to go to achieve their goal, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead. As they approached the edge of the forest, a sense of unease settled over the group. They knew they were getting closer to the danger they had been warned about. The sky had turned dark, and the air was thick with tension. Suddenly, a group of figures appeared in the distance, emerging from the shadows. They were cloaked in black, with their faces hidden behind masks. The group froze, unsure of what to do. One of the figures stepped forward, raising a hand to signal for the others to stop. "You've come a long way, but you won't be going any further," he said in a cold, calculated voice. "You've meddled in affairs that don't concern you. It's time to pay the price." Without warning, the figures charged towards the group, their movements swift and precise. The group fought back, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Just when it seemed like all was lost, a voice boomed through the clearing. "Stop this madness." The figures froze, turning towards the source of the voice. It was the village elder, standing tall with a fierce determination in his eyes. "You have no right to harm these people," he continued. "They have done nothing wrong. Leave them be." The figures hesitated, uncertain of what to do. But after a moment, they turned and disappeared back into the shadows. The group breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for the elders' intervention. But they knew that this was only a temporary reprieve. The danger still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike again. As they continued their journey, they couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over them. They knew that the final showdown was coming, and they needed to be ready for whatever lay ahead. Title of the last chapter 15. The conclusion. The sun was setting on the small town as the last rays of light danced across the horizon. Sarah and James stood outside their home, hand in hand, looking out at the peaceful scene in front of them. It had been weeks since the events that had led them on a thrilling adventure, and they were finally at peace. As they stood there, Sarah couldn't help but think about all the things they had gone through together. She never thought that her simple life would turn into an adventure that would take them to so many different places and bring them face to face with so many dangers. But they had made it through. They had found the treasure, saved the town from disaster, and most importantly, had each other to rely on. Sarah looked up at James and smiled, knowing that they were stronger together than they ever could be apart. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Sarah turned to James and said, "I think it's time to finally settle down and start the next chapter of our lives. What do you think?" James smiled back at her, "I couldn't agree more." And with that, they walked back into their home, ready to start their new life together, with the memories of their adventure etched forever in their hearts.